So good morning, everybody. Welcome back to these very, very interesting debate and sessions. I am moderating right now a session on navigating the energy crisis to sustain EU industrial base. And I will highlight the last part of the sentence, to sustain European Union industrial base, because I think that's the real challenge we had ahead of us. The past few years have been very turbulent for the European industry. The European industry represents 1/3 of the final demand of gas and power in Europe. And it has been very difficult because of three main reasons. First, COVID-19, the lack of investments in the hydrocarbon sector that create an energy crisis, and then exacerbated by the Ukrainian crisis. And that has implied several things. It has implied raising energy and material costs, a supply chain disruptions, and a scarcity of skilled labor in Europe. And that has brought a lot of concerns, and that was the reason of this session, about the industrial competitiveness of Europe and the future resiliency of European industry. And also political consequences in terms of the complexities of combining climate, energy security, and industrial policies, and the implications on geopolitics. I mean, different regions have acted in different ways. The US has established the Inflation Reduction Act that I'm not so sure is going to reduce inflation, maybe the contrary. China, who has always a long-term view, has promoted his 14th five-year plan and has his Made in China strategy, and Japan has also his green transformation policy. And Europe has also made its move to industrial policy. They have launched the Green Deal Industrial Plan, the Net Zero Industry Act, with two main objectives. One is to scale up clean tech manufacturing, good, and second, to create an attractive regulatory environment. I'm not so sure about the later one, but we will discuss that. So, will this proposal be successful? That's what we would like to debate in this session. Some countries have already expressed their concerns. France has even announced their own French IRA and has asked for a regulatory pause in Europe. Industries are asking for a reduction in regulatory requirements and more supportive environment. So the question today that we are going to address with the fourth presenter is how Europe ambitious target for decarbonization can maintain industry competitiveness in Europe. In order to do that, we have four fantastic panelists that cover, I would say, two very important angles. We are going to have first Tim Dawidowsky, who is the COO of Siemens Gamesa and Chief Sustainability Officer. He has 20 years experience in Siemens and has been CEO in different countries. And he's going to cover the industry side of a green energy company like Siemens. Then we will have Tomás Malango, who is Director of Renewable Fuels and Circular Economy at Repsol, and he was also previously the Hydrogen Director. So again, a good example for an industry or a company that is becoming net zero in 2050, that has clear committed plans for that, and that is going to address the issue. And then we are going to have two presenters or two panelists that are going to cover the consequences of the energy transition. And the first one is going to be Junquera. He's the Energy, Industry and Just Transition Director of IndustriALL Global Union. And he's responsible for coordinating industry unions, focusing on the social, financial, and industrial implications of the energy transitions on workers and on employment. And then Juan García-Marquina, who is the head of energy procurement at Ahlstrom, and he's a member of the ExCom of Energy Intensive Industry Associates that will cover the implications in the energy prices of the energy transition. So with two representatives from the industry and two representatives of the areas of concern about the energy transition. So let's start with Tim. team comes from Siemens. Siemens is the leading player in the renewable energy space with international operations. And I think, Jim, that you are in a great position to compare the US and the European legislation and support, because we have presence in both places. And I was reading recently that you were in the Wind Europe event in Denmark, that next year will take place in Bilbao in Spain. And you say that supporting European growth targets require a tremendous amount of investment, and that requires direct support for manufacturers. So I would be very pleased that you elaborate on those comments.
Good. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure being here. Well, by the end, it boils down to the question, as you can see on the screen, what are climate protection and independency and independent energy worth to us? I think we touched already in the earlier panel, it has something to do with cost as well, right? And this cannot be ignored. Let me start a little bit. If I move to the next slide, I think that's the toy I need to use here, right? Yeah. Okay. Let me start a little bit with the question, where do I believe do we stand, and what will be the answer of our company to the challenges we see, and how does that relate also to all the legislation which has been put out in the European Union, but also I will touch the IRA for sure. Well, the energy crisis and war in the Ukraine have shown that, I would say, economics, politics enhance energy sovereignty and climate protection. And what does it mean when we provide affordable, clean energy? That is all what we want to do. I think there is no dispute in the target itself. It's not the what, it's going to be the how, I believe, which makes the difference. Also for that purpose, and we have seen that painfully, we need to stabilize our supply chains, right? We have seen if the Chinese government decides to shut down the port in Shanghai, we had storm in our supply chain, right? That was a simple fact. And that I don't know whether everybody is really aware very concretely about the dependency many industries have. I mean, it's easy to talk academically about that. I can tell you it's tremendous. And if people talk about independency, it's going to be evolution, not a revolution. It's naive to believe that we switch the system back, which we created also, let's be honest, right, within a couple of years. Because it goes far down to almost every element. And I will explain that a little bit on the wind industry if you're really interested in. And we need to have manufacturing capabilities in the countries. That's also we know, right? Transport became an issue. I can tell you all our plants we had somewhere in Asia suddenly became overnight incompetitive because all the transport costs have blown off, let me say, every business case. And we needed to switch, overnight sourcing strategies. That's going to challenge, and that has something to do with also what we're going to do different moving forward. And for sure, we need to maintain, and I would also expand technology leadership. For the wind industry, I can say it's clearly that we are on the edge of the leadership itself. So we don't have an issue that we don't know what to do and what technology is all about. But that needs to be maintained and that needs support as well. And for sure, it's also about creating jobs, right? It would be a pity if we all go for the energy transition and for the society and the job creation. There's nothing in for that because we are always importing everything. So that is the situation we'll see. And on the other side, we see now this massive. And everybody has realized that meanwhile legislation support, political support, the government support, the build-out targets are tremendous. And everybody has seen that, but it is basically, to make it very simple, as you can see here, we need to double within the next years by 2030. So it's just 7 years to go, right? What has been done up to now. That needs to be doubled now. There is no way, I can tell you already right up front, that anybody has the capacity now to do that. No way. That's the reason why we are, from an industry perspective, not impressed any longer by new targets. Whether it's 200 giga more or 300 or 400 doesn't make a difference, because we don't have the capacity anyway to support it unless we massively invest. And the same is true for the US. And there's a difference in the US coming to the IRA. The US has put a very simple scheme in place, a simple scheme. I'm not comparing now, right, the whole industry approach we've taken in the EU with the US. There are different elements. But there's one huge advantage on the IRA side. It's pretty simple. It's damn simple. You create jobs, and in return, you get cash right away. I can build a plant in the US, cash neutral. Impossible in Europe, because I even don't know how the 27 member states are acting. And I'm speaking reality, right? So we have talks now to, I would say, at least 4 governments. And the support they can offer under the regime, even with the European Investment Bank involved in this, I would say overseeable, I would call it. Almost neglectable. And that is a challenge for us moving forward, because we will not have the capacities in order to build out those targets. So, what does it mean? It means fundamental. And I mean fundamental. Swift and decisive change. It's not about setting targets, right? It's easy to set targets. It's about the way how we implement that. And there is, with all the good thing, I mean, let's be honest, we appreciate and support very much the industrial plan of the EU Green Deal, also the Critical Raw Material Act, as well as the Net Zero Industry Act. This all goes in the right direction. I think it comes now down to the point how member states are implementing that. And it's like in a company, right? Usually we're never short of ideas. If we fail, then we fail on implementation. And not on the idea itself. And that's going to be the interesting part for all of us moving forward. How do we react to the situation we are in? And let me, from an OEM perspective, I don't know whether everybody aware what the situation is. If you look to the 4 big Western producers, it's General Electric, Vestas, Siemens Gamesa, and Nordex. We are all loss-making. Not a little. You can look to the books. Everybody is losing billions. So we have a situation where we are in the industry which provides, I would say, almost like no other industry in the world's growth potential. And we are all losing money. So what do you believe the normal reaction will be as a business leader if you lose money? You are not drunk any longer for joy because you see all the growth and all of that. You do everything turning the company around, because only if you make money you can do investment, and only if you make money you can secure jobs. So we are all in a very bizarre situation that on one side the energy transition for sure needs wind as one of the strong pillars, and without wind it won't work. And on the other hand, with all the support from the EU around the world, from many legislations, the main elements of that value chain, meaning the ones who need to provide these little turbines, who make the trick by the end, are all loss-making units, tremendously, billions. So if you're loss-making, you cannot finance, right? For us, the growth is a problem now, because we don't have the financial capabilities in order to finance that. If I would do everything I need to do, and I could see, and even more, I need to invest over the 5 next years billions out of a non-existing cash flow. That doesn't work. And that's a challenge, because that endangers the build-out targets we all have. So how do we react to that? And that is our program, Mistral. Not by accident it sounds icy and from the north, because it's a rough environment we are in. So first of all, we de-risk the business. And de-risking means, very simple, we are not accepting contracts any longer without inflation protection. Then we don't deliver. We don't offer. And especially in the offshore industry, what we offer today, we deliver in 5-6 years. That's the normal cycle time we have. how can you predict under this environment, the experience we have made during the war, how your cost development will be over the next 5 years? It's almost impossible. We have lost tremendous amount of money because of that. And so, consequently speaking, without inflation protection, we're going to not sign any contract. What has that to do with legislation? Yeah, that comes back now to the auction mechanism. You also decide from a legislation perspective, right? So we would like to make sure that everybody participates also in a certain protection in terms of inflation. That can be built into a system, which hasn't been the case up to now. De-risking means also diversification of the supply chain. Right? That means also we need to go to different countries and make sure that we do the right thing and not getting everything out of one country. We have a lot of single source, a lot of single country, and a lot of independency across the board. All major casted components on the wind turbine, all major casted components, because of its size and also because of the process, how it's being done, are mainly coming out of China. Permanent magnets we need for the turbine, for the generator itself, all 100% out of China. We signed now a Siemens Gamesa, we started signing, we have signed the deal with the mining in Australia, just for rare earth. And also to avoid misunderstandings here, the materials we are using for the permanent magnets, it's not called rare earth because they are rare. It's called rare earth because nobody else wanted to have the process in-house in, getting the things out of the ground and making products out of that, because that it's not so nice and not so environmentally friendly. That's the reason why it has ended up in countries, and they do it cheaper, and they do it not according to our standards when it comes to ESG as well. So when we talk about the Critical Raw Material Act, we need to answer the question. Basically, it was touched on, not in my backyard, right? Are we accepting all of that? And are we accepting also higher price? I can tell you, if I get 25% of my permanent magnets now from a different source outside of China, it has a single-digit impact on the overall cost of the turbine. Who's paying for that? Is it built into the auction system? Do we have non-qualitative criteria in the decision matrix for an auction system where ESG criteria are being considered? No. By the end, we are comparing two natural numbers. So all the effort we are putting in, if we get material in Europe or not out of China any longer, right, that will have a cost impact. It will have a cost impact, and we need to find a solution who's paying for that by the end. Because if we are forced to compete on the scheme we are currently competing, then there will be no change also in this respect, right? And that is something I'm urging for. Adjustment of capacities, I mentioned that. We need to invest tremendously. We don't have the money. And as long as we don't have the money, we'll make the opposite what people would expect from us. We will take capacity off the market in order to make the turbine a luxury good and increase pricing. That doesn't, let me say, help the build-out targets. And the only way in turning that around, coming back to the statement I made in Copenhagen, we need financial support, we need cash. It's all about cash. We need cash, we cannot finance that. We are looking for different solutions also ourselves in order to get things being built and leased back and all the models we might do, but we need cash in order to build the capacities in order to support the growth. There are some other elements you can see long-term wise. For time reasons, I would like to stop here and then ready for the Q&As later on. It's going to be interesting. Thank you very much.
Now, thank you very much for your very, I would say, blunt statements and your clarity. Cristina Lobillo yesterday night at dinner, she said to all the attendants that we need to be vocal and that we need to put pressure on them so that the legislation goes according to what are the real needs. So you follow her advice. And as you say, we have very ambitious targets, but what makes the difference is the how, no? And linking with the how, I would like to ask you one question. Which are the three things that Siemens Gamesa would like to see happen to realize the ambitious targets that you mentioned for renewables that we had in Europe?
Implementation. I'm not criticizing any longer the legislation. I think there has been tremendous progress being made. Permitting times. I think Germany has taken the lead here. The European Union has taken it over. There's now a superseding public interest in the law, meaning, you know, we don't check ourselves to death any longer when it comes to permitting. It goes now quick. And that is important. Why it goes quick? Because permitting requires visibility and clarity on the projects. If we know there are auctions, the auctions are being planned, and there's a chance that the auction are being awarded, then we know what we need to plan for. And our planning horizon is minimum 5 years. And we have an outlook plan 10 years. So I don't care what happens tomorrow, right? I care what happens 28, 29, 2010, and that is in line with our portfolio development as well. That's important. Permitting, cash. I repeated myself, we don't need loans and all of that. We need direct help in building capacities. It is tremendous amount. I mean, if we build a new blade factory, and I give you some numbers now. A blade factory, we need to go into areas where usually nobody would like to sell its land because it's on the coastline. For offshore, blades are 100 meters and they will most likely go up to 135 meters. So we need a tremendous amount of space directly in the coastline, right? That is usually where people like to make vacation and not seeing a plant. It is costly. Minimum 600 million costs such a plant. And then you have all the investment around of that. That needs, and we need multiple of them in order to cope with that. So that needs direct help, because if you look to our balance sheet, we are not able to finance that. Full stop. Second, and the third point is qualitative criteria in the auction. More than just economics make a difference. ESG targets should also be considered in any award, because that is what makes the difference Europe compared to other parts of the world.
Good. Very good summary of the three things that are needed. So now we turn to Tomás Malango. Tomás Malango comes from Repsol. Repsol was the first oil and gas company in the world to announce a detailed net zero plan for 2050 and has ambitious target to decarbonize. I mean, more than 40% of the capex of Repsol is in low carbon solutions. So a company totally committed with energy transition. So Tomás, I mean, amongst other things, I really would like you to cover what is the role of energy companies like Repsol, the role they can play in the European industrial strategy.
Okay, thank you, first of all, Iván and Esade, for inviting me, and thank you, team, for making the work easier. You have to get very clear, and so I think from our perspective, it will be easier. I think the energy transition is a moment in which Europe is going to be in front of the mirror and have to decide what they're going to be in the upcoming years. Mm-hmm. This is a threat or an opportunity. We can look at it on both sides, but I think the most important thing is that we have a clarity of how we foresee in the future, how we want to make it happen. And since that point, from our perspective, industrial contribution to GDP is critical in order to have an economy stability, to have a quality of jobs, to have the possibility to interact with other economical areas with sufficient strength to collaborate, because you have to offer something in there. And the industry has a key role in that. And now, I think the last figures I saw regarding Europe is like industry GDP contribution is like 18%, something a little bit below that, when it was expected to be 20% by 2020. So it's decreasing. And if you have a look on the capabilities that Europe have and Europe can offer to the rest of the world, there are two main areas where we have industries that makes a difference. One is the energy sector, I would say, and for sure, Siemens, Gamesa is a good example of that. And the other one is the mobility sector, where the automakers are doing a lot of work on that. So energy, we are talking about renewables, generation and renewable molecules, I would say. These are the two areas where Europe can make a difference. And the other one will be something related to mobility and how we want to transform our existing mobility industry, who has been leading some of the segments of the mobility worldwide and into this new era. No? At this point, I think coming down to the industry right now and the net zero IndustriALL and all this regulation that Europe is launching out there, we have the opportunity to make a difference in this point, and this is very linked to how we're going to create the right framework to transform the existing industry to this new industry. And I'm going to give some examples. I'm not going to come back, of course, on the wind and the offshore wind, which is team has explained very well, and I think is a good potential strength out there. But I think we have our automakers that can transform part of their facilities into electrolyzers production facility. This is something that can be done. We have it working on that with some of them, and the facilities are easily transforming that. We have the ability to transform our existing existing energy and chemical industries into low carbon industries, taking advantage on that. Fertilizers, low carbon solutions for mobility, and so on. Circular economy is a potential for Europe to make a difference because we have the most advanced collecting waste system worldwide, and you can transform this waste into raw materials and create a new business there. And I think that was also talked in the previous panel regarding the batteries and so on. So I think there are some niche markets. We cannot compete in everything. Let's be honest. We can compete in some areas where we have strengths, we put our energy, we create the right framework to make it happen, and we can push that ahead to make it real. No? From Repsol side, what we are doing on that? Again, you say targets, I agree that targets are, we are trying to create, this is a kind of race of targets, we are trying to create targets that we really can achieve and we can do. By the moment, we have a target to make 20 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, 2 gigawatts of hydrogen, which is more or less our existing consumption of hydrogen. So I will say that is doable if we have the right framework, and 2.5 million tons of renewable fuels in order to decarbonize these hard-to-abate systems, industry, part of the mobility, aviation, marine, part of the heavy duty, even part of the light duty, because even though the batteries are coming, they need time, and it has been explained, and we have to decarbonize faster than the timeline to up and running all of this. So we're going to make this, we're going to deliver this to the market and provide this. The other thing that we can do is we can help on other industries in Europe create ecosystems to decarbonize and to make a difference on that. And we are doing, and I'm going to give a couple of examples. So we are doing a collaboration with Navantia, which is a Spanish ship construction company, in order to transform some of the facilities into electrolyzers production facility. We are doing collaboration with Calavera, which is another Spanish company, to create hydrogen refilling stations to be delivered in Spain. And we're collaborating also with Naturgy to deliver biomethane production plant that will decarbonize not only our sector, but also our other sectors that will not be able to pay for hydrogen. Maybe they need some other molecule out there. So we can work together, create the right the framework. What we need behind of that is a very clear, and I will close with that, the regulation. And I think Inflation Reduction Act has been a good reflection for the European approach on this. I think Europe has been very focused on quotas, which is a way to create, I would say, create a market by putting the price on the end user. Maybe when the volume is low or the impact on the income of the people is acceptable, it runs. So when you start creating the market, it runs. Then when the amounts increase, you start creating some pressure on inflation and the availability of the products. And when you're talking about energy, this is a very basic product. Nobody can skip over that. And the Inflation Reduction Act is putting the pressure on the debt. It's putting incentives coming from the taxes, and it's moving the ball forward for the next generation, which makes sense. I think in Europe we have these two tools. One is the quotas, and I don't want to come back on that. The other one is the tax, the energy tax directive, which is almost stuck, and I think it's something that could make a difference in order to create the right environment to make it work for our industry. So that is it. I think we have the opportunity. It's a question of seeing if we want to make the difference and we want to accept some of the downside that are there and be very transparent on that, price, mining, some activities out there. If we don't, it will just fly away.
Good. Thank you very much, Tomás, for your clarity. You mentioned the need for the right framework. You also mentioned the need for more collaboration and creation of ecosystems. And you mentioned hydrogen. And I would like to follow up a little bit on hydrogen. No? So which are the key strategic directions that need to be taken to accelerate the development of hydrogen? We have heard, and we hear very often, the hydrogen. This morning, Cristina Lobillo was talking about hydrogen and the joint purchasing of hydrogen in Europe. How can we accelerate that? What are the specific directions that we need to take?
Well, first, considering that hydrogen is not the silver bullet, because we have changed from electricity, now it seems like hydrogen is the new silver bullet. It's not a silver bullet. I think it is important to have a realistic approach to what hydrogen can be used for. Mm-hmm. And then there is a first approach. If you see who's using hydrogen today, mm-hmm. it's clear that chemical, ammonia, and methanol, and refining are the three businesses taking 90% of ammonia worldwide. No matter the split of the market is different between the areas. Some areas is ammonia, the other one is refining, but essentially 90% of hydrogen is there. So we should focus on that. If we focus on transforming the existing consumption of hydrogen into renewable, low-carbon hydrogen solutions, I think technology neutrality is something also important that Europe has to have a look at what is going on in the US. If you do that, you can leverage a significant business. We have like 10% of the hydrogen consumption in Europe. Worldwide. So we have the most part of the electrolyzer manufacturers are European. Mm-hmm. We have the wind, which is long with high capacity factor provider energy. That is very interesting for electrolyzers. Also, we have the hydro in Europe. So the question is focusing the tools on the segments that are going to leverage the business, which are the existing hydrogen consumption. They will be willing to pay a little bit more for that. Probably than others, and since that point, look around how we can expand, if it is possible, this business into new applications. But it has to be done in that way. If we do it just around, because sometimes we hear about gigawatts of hydrogen to be applied to things that are not using hydrogen today. For me, it's difficult to understand how it's going to make it work, because you are doing like a double change at the same time, changing the technology, changing your feedstock to go into something more expensive. It's difficult to figure out how you're going to make it work. So I think focusing on that, making it run, and where hydrogen is consuming is the key to make it run.
Good. So let's focus on the obvious, and let's focus on what makes sense from an economical point of view and an environmental point of view. Good. So now we are turning into Diana Junquera, no? And I mean, it's clear, and I think that everybody in this room agrees with me that we need to decarbonize the economy as soon and as deep as possible, but with the lowest social cost. And that's why we have here Diana, because Diana representing the unions in the world that are, in a sense, suffering, and that can be positive or negative, suffering the consequence of energy transition. We would like from you to understand the importance of collaboration between industry, labor, and policymakers in developing a sustainable and just transition energy transition strategy for the European Union. So what does the Net Zero Industry Act mean for the industry and the skill development of our workers?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would like to start first introducing IndustriALL Global Union. That maybe sounds weird for all the people that is here. We are a global union federation that represents 50 million workers in all the industries that you can imagine. So we start from automotive sector, textile, base metals, mining, chemical, energy, all what you can imagine. And it's
impressive number of people.
Yes, and it's a very good link with the first roundtable that we had this morning about the battery supply chain, because we are also working on that, because we organize workers in the entire supply chain, from the extractive industries, from mining to the components, to the chemical, assembling the materials, making the panels, until the end use of the batteries, like could be the automotive sector or the energy sector. So that's an introduction. So with that, I'm in charge of the energy sector, that is where I'm specialized, and also in the just transition. So I would like to start defining what is just transition, because now it's a trending topic. Everyone is talking about just transition, but the reality is that what we are doing is the energy transition. We are not there in talking about the just transition and what does it mean, or what does it implies for workers and for the society, communities, and families. So for us, the just transition is based on three pillars. It's based on the tripartite dialogue. And that is coming from the ILO, the International Labour Organization, who represents the governments, the employers, and the workers. There is no dialogue without these three parts. And in this just transition, we have to understand that the working conditions must be decent, but for that, we need this transition to be organized, to be planned in advance. We cannot, with all what is happening now, we take the risk that going too fast and not making the transition in a proper way. But of course, it has to be based on the social dialogue. There is no just if there is no social dialogue. In that case, we will talk about transition, energy transition in general. But we can only say that it's just when we are talking with the three parts, with all the stakeholders, but also discussing with the communities. And you were mentioning now, where are the blades plants and where it have to be? You have to talk to the communities as well, where you are going to put it. So it's an entire thing, entire dialogue that we must confirm. Regarding, you were asking about the Net Zero Industry Act, and we welcome it, as well as the raw materials. It was mentioned this morning because the voice of workers have been heard, and we have managed to put our inputs, our footprint in this act, and we understand that this is going to bring new jobs, but how are going to be these new jobs? This is where we also have to put the focus. The main the worry that we have is how the new jobs are going to be, where are going to be, because it's clear that the transition is not going to happen in the same place where we are. We will need to move ourselves, our families, our plants. If we are closing a plant here, it doesn't mean that tomorrow we are going to start just door to door in another plant of renewables that is going to be green and great. We would love to, but we have to be realistic, and this is not going to happen. So because of that, we need that anticipation done in advance. And in order to face these changes and this transition, we need to be trained. Workers need skills, and need to be trained, re-skilled, and need to be prepared for the future jobs that they are going to face. There are some cases where we can see companies, mostly in the energy sector, that they are coming from the fossil fuels, now transforming into renewables, investing in renewables. And we could say that it's a bit easier for them because the workers could stay in the same company, and they could transform from one place to another. But what happened in the companies that they have to close? what is happening now, and here Spain is one of the examples, with the close of the coal mines, with the closure of the thermal power plants because of coal. What happened with that people? The thing is that, to me, I'm also Spanish, and as Cristina was mentioning yesterday, for me Spain is always a good example. But something that is failing in the Spanish legislation is the anticipation. We are not preparing the field in advance, and that's something that is key if we want to success in this energy transition. And of course, we need money. You were saying we need cash. Of course, we need cash. But right now, if we want to proceed with this transition, we need investments, and we are also putting the focus on private investments. But those investments have to be linked always with working conditions, with decent working conditions, with collective bargaining agreements, and with organized workplaces. And one example, for example, is the Just Transition Fund that it was made by the European Commission. But the main thing of this Just Transition Fund is that it's not enough. There is no money enough for all what we need, for all the demand that we are requiring right now. And just an example with some figures is that this Just Transition Fund from 2021 to 2027 is providing 19 billion of euros for the entire European Union. Only Germany, in 3 regions in Germany that are closing the coal mines, is 38 billions. 38 in Germany in 3 regions, compared with 19 for the entire Europe. So I think that is not enough. So it's okay, it's good, it's something to start, but we need much more. Yeah, and we also have, as unions, we have some demands, and it could be because workers are people. We are all workers here, and we all have families, and we all like to eat every day, right? And to feed our families. So we need affordable energy for everyone, but in the short term, I mean, we cannot ask people to choose if they have to switch on the heating or if they have to eat. Yesterday, a friend that is working on human resources in a company, she was telling me that during the high prices of the oil, the fuel, that a lot of people stop working. I mean, they have to ask for sick leave because they couldn't afford the gasoline to go to work. That's crazy. That's crazy. And it is not an energy company. It was a pharmaceutical company. So we really need to think about that. Also, that workers cannot pay the price of all these changes, of all this transition. We are part of the solution. We are not part of the problem. And we cannot be seen as troublemakers. I mean, we are part of the solution, and we want to be there because we are making your business successful. We are working with you, and we are all together in all this transition. We are not confronting. This is not about asking for higher salaries, or asking for more holidays. No. This is not that confrontation. This is about going together hand by hand in the same way. And also the last point is that the European energy industries are part of this answer. We need to reindustrialize Europe. But for me, we are talking about Europe here, but I'm in charge of the unions at global level. I think that this has to be a key point, and also because we have been discussing a lot about raw materials and the different countries. This has to be a key to reindustrialize other countries and to give them the power that they need in order to create growth and for them to succeed as well.
Good. Thank you very much. It has been a very comprehensive presentation, and I had some questions for you that you have already answered. But I mean, what I take from your intervention is that, I mean, and I think we all agree, is that the objective is clear. The issues are the how, the implementation. You mentioned that. It was also mentioned in the previous session. And now you raise another issue, which is the speed. We need a speed that allows us to develop the industrial capabilities and also to upskill and reskill the workers that are going, or whose value supply chains or value chains are going to be affected by the energy transition. No, and maybe that will be my question to you. I mean, how we can ensure that we are able to develop in time or to reskill in time the workers that are needed for the energy transition, especially in a situation where in Europe we are starting to face a lot of talent because of the low demography in Europe, and also because in some cases entering the industrial work that, as you say, is very important. I mean, to have a, because, I mean, work in the industrial sector is much more stable, it has much more quality than in other sectors. What can the European Union, what can we do to make sure that we are able to create or to re-skill that workforce that is going to be needed for the future?
Okay, I will say that the sooner the better. We should start yesterday, not today or not tomorrow. We should already have started. But something that is key is the transparency and to have information in order to be able to go through. Yeah, I mean, no one has the crystal ball here, and we don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. But we can have an idea. We have the strategic plans from all the energy companies and all the big companies making this energy transition. So with those plans, we can guess how the future looks like and what are going to be the skills that we need. If we have to ask for something to the European Union Commission, we will ask for some time, but also money, also finance, because to me there is something, as I was mentioning, if you are transitioning in the same company from one position to another, is going to be easier because that company can provide you the training and the skills that you will need. But if you are transitioning from one company that is closing to another one, how are you going to do that? The company that is closing is going to say, I don't care, it's not my business, I'm closing this, it's up to you. But who must be in charge of that? In that case, I will say that it will be the countries, the governments, who should take responsibility in order to create energy plans in the medium and long term, not in the short term, because we have been hearing this morning about the importance of security in the investments. If the companies don't know what is going to happen, they are not going to invest. Investors, the same. And workers are not going to trust anyone because they think that they are going to change from one day to another. So I will say long-term, medium, long-term initiatives in the energy transition and finance in order to support the skilling and reskilling.
So basically we need a smart and just energy transition. Yes. And for that we need time and we need money.
Exactly.
Good.
Summary.
So now back to our Juan García. Juan García is going to talk about, or I hope he's going to talk about how Ahlstrom is addressing the energy procurement challenges and how to avoid an exodus of EU energy-intensive industries toward the US or towards China, no? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, cost, volatility, and availability of energy has a huge impact in energy-intensive industries and, as a consequence, in all the European economy. So, Juan?
Thank you, Iván, and thank you, Ángel, and the rest of the EsadeGeo team. Thank you, Energy as well. I would say that my takeaway, no, the word that I'm taking is collaboration, because we are the end consumer, the end energy consumer, and we could not provide the fiber-based solutions that we provide without people, without technology manufacturers, without utilities, without research. So collaboration for us is paramount. No? And today I'm going to show you and share with you an example, no, on how an energy-intensive industry is preparing itself for this transition or even a transformation. No? Ahlstrom is a Finnish company with headquarters in Helsinki. We are producing fiber-based solutions from fiber, the pulp. We have 38 plants, you see, as Iván was mentioning, in Asia, in the States, and obviously quite in different countries in Europe. So internally, we are competing also with our own brothers, sisters worldwide. And we have our products are covering different needs in these divisions that we are I'm showing here: filtration, food and consumer packaging, healthcare, business materials, and technical materials. So what we did was first undertaking our own diagnostic. We said we want to be part of this decarbonization process. We have huge volatility of our energy costs. How do we deal with that? Obviously, we have a hedging strategy put in place, but hedging strategy typically only covers 1, 2, 3 years ahead. But we have a commitment. We engage to the science-based target initiative to decarbonize, to reduce our emissions in scope 1 and 2. So, and I'm showing here in this page our strategic pillars. You see that our purpose is basically to purify and to protect with every fiber for a sustainable world. We see that our products contribute to solving sustainable challenges that the world is facing today and that will face in the incoming years. We have a change in the underlying assumptions because we saw during the last year and a half that we cannot rely on stable energy prices. We were used to kind of volatility, but when it goes 3, 4, 5-fold, you cannot take sounded decisions. And we are basing our strategy in a sustainable product portfolio, on a sustainable production footprint as well. And I would say the last one is the one that I like most, in sustainable growth, because typically companies grow reinvesting their results, But now we have to invest more than that, so far from what is considered sustainable, because we have targets for 2030, and this to do that we need huge amount of investment. So the diagnostic that we did internally wanted to ask the question that we have in the right, in the bottom right side of the slide. What is the ideal energy strategy that ensures a future-proof, sustainable energy mix for our company? This morning, Christina mentioned as the energy, the 3 legs of the energy. We call it the energy trilemma. So what we wanted to do by defining this sustainable, future-proof mix of energy was trying to optimize our costs, and again, the volatility, also reducing our emissions, and finally, being more flexible or even diversifying, moving away from fossil fuels. And and this is an equilibrium. We cannot have everything, So during the last months, we were following this kind of methodology that I'm showing here. We defined 4 different scenarios to test how different technologies would behave when fossil fuels are really high, when they could be really low, also taking current forwards, and also some fundamental baseline scenarios that we considered. We were analyzing also more than 20 technologies. We are producing fiber-based solutions, but typically we consume electricity and natural gas. So we are within the pulp and paper sector. So we were analyzing not only gas boilers, but also biomass boilers, waste boilers, electric boilers, small modular reactors. So you can imagine a wide array of technologies, from those that are very mature to others that are incipient. And there are pros and cons, because those that are less mature, you can find some programs for research and development aids, funding. So we analyzed more than 20 technologies. Also, we ran different innovation workshops with potential partners. So we said, okay, the theory says that we could switch from a coal boiler or natural gas boiler to this other technology, but let's map what utilities could have the capabilities geographically and also technologically. And it was very enriching, because it was a conversation. I can do this. Have you thought of doing that? So we could define finally optimal scenarios for 10 selected mills that were consuming more than 50% of our energy needs. And then you saw at the beginning that we have 38 sites. We were clustering and trying to derive that the solutions that we are selecting here should be applied to these other sites. So this was part of our diagnostic. And the diagnostic, again, was focused on the trilemma that we saw at the beginning, but also trying to fulfill this commitment that we decided to follow. Which means reducing around 38% of our carbon emissions by 2030, and also 90% in 2050, but then with other actions becoming a net zero. You can see in the left side of this curve that we focused our first actions in energy efficiency, because these are the low-hanging fruits, the ones that you can do kind of easily. And then during this period, and that was the exercise and the diagnostic that we undertook, wanted to go one step further, to reach that 38% in 2030. So what we say internally, is that you can have your diagnostic. It's like an athlete preparing, the 4 years to take part in the Olympic Games, and then realizing that you need your clothing, you need your flight ticket to go to the Olympics, but it requires a lot of cash, a lot of money. This is a privately held company, so we have some CapEx programs, but of course, if we want to reach the targets for 2030, here is a question of money and time, and at least we have this internal diagnostic, to take the next steps with a sounded methodology.
Good. So it's clear that you are fully committed with energy transition, that you are doing the right steps, and that you are going to be part of the solution. We are running a little bit out of time, so I will move directly into a question for the 4 presenters before we open the floor for more questions. And the question I will ask the 4 presenters is something that is now a big debate, Macron a week ago started to claim that we need a regulatory pause in Europe. Through the morning and yesterday dinner, we have heard a lot about the need to facilitate the permitting in the environmental issues, administrative issues, in social issues, And I was attending last week also an event for small and medium enterprise, and they all were complaining about the bureaucracy, the extra cost, and the complexity of following all the thousands and thousands of regulations. And as an example, if we compare the Net Zero Industry Act in the US, that I think is around 400 pages, and the one, so the IRA versus the European one, who is 4,000 pages, it also looks like there is an embedded complexity also in the documents. No. So my question to the four presenters: how we can avoid the hyper-regulation that we have in Europe, and how this is affecting our industries? Maybe starting with Tim.
Yeah, I would say we need to distinguish here between big corporations and small-sized companies as well, right? I mean, I'm representing now most likely the bigger corporations here, and for us it is, I was saying, more easy to access and influence and put resources in order to understand. But I think for smaller companies it's a nightmare, let's be honest. They might not go for that because they simply don't know how to do it. I would say simplification is the key word. IRA is a good example. I think what I would object to is, any sort of national egoism we need to remove. All these local content requirements usually related to that doesn't help the whole show. And that is the reason why I would say let's stick to Europe, let's make it easier, and let's specifically help the smaller companies, and then we're better off.
You take?
Yep. Yeah, I will agree, but I'm not that much in the legislation part. But I will agree that it should be easier for the investors to make all these changes, because if it's easier for them, it will be easier for everyone. But I will also add that they must ensure that this investment has to come with a supportive framework to support this transformation, this energy transition, and also to the industries that are dependent on because we are not talking about only energy, we are talking about all the industries around related.
Juan?
Hyper-regulating, no? I would say that everything is hyper-regulated. Laws started in the 2nd century and then have been evolved, so we have hyper-regulation everywhere. But I would say that the good approach, and I buy your comment and yesterday's comment from Christina, I would say that being vocal, no? Because if you do this bottom-up and you scale what you think is important for your business, then I would assume that the regulators would focus on what the end users are requiring, rather than regulating from a theoretical point of view, and that would be simpler as well.
Tomás?
I think that the approaches from Europe and US have a different in the baseline. Is that US regulation is based on the target, so we want to reduce the carbon intensity, and from that point I construct everything, and Europe is based on I want the world to be like this, and then I can regulate to make it like this, and at the same time, so not only on the goal but also on the pathway. So, and I think the complexity must be erased from that point. The only single important thing is to reduce the carbon footprint of our activities and remain with the activities running in order to achieve the sustainability from all the perspective that we are talking about. If that is done, it's simple. If you want to just put a target and then you put incentives and make it run. If you want to create the pathway, then you have it. You get more complex. So I think you have to rebuild the baseline from where Europe is constructing this regulation.
Good. So now we open the floor for questions. I mean, we will take 1, 2, 3 questions, and then we will ask the presenters to answer them. So who has a question?
Thank you for the contributions. So one question for Mr. Dawidowsky is, so the bizarre situation of the wind energy, or the wind energy manufacturers, which is quite astonishing from an outside perspective. So do we agree that, so just to clarify, are we just talking about the tender issue that doesn't incorporate many of the unforeseeable elements that can come in here? Or is there something else that needs to change in order to make the industry grow profitably as one would expect? And can I have a couple of...
Yes.
And for Mr. Malango, I want to ask one question. Mr. Malango, when do you foresee do you foresee in the near future the incorporation of renewable fuels in the daily life of us motor vehicle owners?
So two very specific.
I have many more questions.
You got your turn. So maybe Tim and then Tomás.
Yeah, for sure there's, like always, I mean, there are many reasons why an industry is in the situation it's currently in. There are also homemade reasons. I mean, we shouldn't, ignore the fact that the industry, to a certain extent, has contributed to putting themselves into a difficult situation, right? There are also, we shouldn't neglect. There are ways getting out of that, so I'm not worrying about that. That is, I think, normal style now, where we need to implement a few things in order to get that clear. If I come back to the legislation part, then I think it's more about creating a level playing field. And we can argue about everything, right? Whether we should do more local and bring industry in here and industrialize also Europe and increase the share of our value chain. It only works if we have the same set. So we are not fearing competition, by the way. Competition is good. I like it, right? It's something good which drives companies also going into a performance mode. So that is all good, but it must be under fair conditions. So you can buy from me. I'm always be very precise because I like, if we don't ending up in theoretical discussions. You can buy a very sustainable turbine from me. We have green tower steel. We have a recyclable blade. You can have all of that. Are you willing to pay for it? I can most likely in a couple of years also get raw material being somewhere in Europe, right? It's all fine. Most likely also under conditions which are more favorable, where we would, as a civilized country, would say, no, that is how, we would expect our workers also to work, right? I lived 4 years in China, also was active in mining industry and other industries. I've seen mining places. I don't believe that is something we would like to import here, to be honest. So how do you compare that moving forward then? How do you factor all these things into a decisive metrics so that you are fair being treated? If it's all about comparing by the end two natural numbers, then we are missing out on many things we are targeting here, also in order to create a more sustainable world. Right? And that is, I think, very important from a legislation perspective. And it's a thin line, so I have respect for the policymakers as well. Right? On one side to, have competition in place, because competition is basically a good one, and we all believe that this is a fundamental of our business, right? We would like to have competition. On the other side, creating a playing field which is fair.
Mm-hmm. Good. Very clear answer. Tomás.
From my side, I would say, first of all, it's clear that we are not good in communications because we are already delivering renewable fuels and nobody knows that. And so it's an improvement point for us. If you go now to Spain and you refuel your car, you are adding 10.5% of renewable energy, for sure. What we have to do is to make it massive and to make it, I will say, as a separate product, I will say differentiated, not blended as it is today. We have already opened 3 gas stations with 100% of renewable diesel delivery right now. Is more dedicated for heavy duty. Indeed, one is in Madrid, close to Mercamadrid, to the point where you can you concentrate on the logistics of the food for the city. And our plan is to have around 100% by 2025. So we are trying to advocate and to put it more clear for everybody that this is a product that is there and you can be used. We need some adaptations for some of the vehicles for sure to make it more massive, but this has minor adaptations because at the end of the day, renewable fuels are kind of drop-in fuel, so you really need big changes to make it work.
Good. So just to close the session, I would like to ask a question for the four presenters. And this is a question I would like you to answer in a headline or a tweet. We are now in a society that Twitter looks like is the most important media communication tool, and politicians are only concerned about the headline in the newspaper tomorrow, no? So this is your moment to have a headline. And the headline is going to be around what should be the priority for the European Commission to maintain the European industry competitiveness, who is the focus of this session, while reaching the ambitious decarbonization targets that we have. So what specific measure, only one headline, would you recommend? Tim?
Headline in newspaper should be, avoid that the wind industry follows the photovoltaic industry and the solar industry.
Good.
Our headline should be that industrial workers' voice must be heard in the current and the future industrial policies in Europe and the world.
Very good. Juan?
Mine would be simplifying and full collaboration.
Very good. And Tomás, the last one is always the most difficult.
Yeah. I'll focus on the goals, not on the technologies.
Fantastic. So we got 4 headlines that we will put on Twitter, on EsadeGeo Twitter, and I think has been a great discussion. You have been vocal. You have pressure on the politicians. So now we are expecting them to act on behalf of your recommendations. So thank you very much.
Thank you.